that, and we'll kind of dive right in. So let me go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll bring this thing up. Okay, so while I am very, very excited, the thing that I have to open this with is not all that exciting to a lot of IT folks, and that is that IT is dead. At least as we in IT know it, it is dead. Now, I consider myself an IT person. I grew up in the IT industry, and this is pretty much all I've ever known. And so this is something that is very personal to me. But I think it's something that we need to come to terms with, and it's something that really, I think more than anything, was a realization. As things started to evolve and continue in our work, we just saw this happening. Now, I believe that this is not even a prediction. I believe this is a fact. I believe it is certainly happening, and I believe in many ways it has already happened, that the fundamental underpinnings of how the IT organization within an enterprise works has just changed forever. Or is at least on that path. And the question is, and when I talk to IT executives or at IT industry conferences, the question I have is, if this is true, if we in IT, if we're dead, how come we don't know it? Because I think the truth is that most people in IT have no idea that this ground has literally shifted beneath their feet, and really they're standing on air, and it's about to fall out from underneath them. And the question is, why? Well, okay, I'm sorry, so I'm being told to hang on a sec.
This is John. Sean, I see you have an attention raised. Is there a question? I've unmuted your line for you. Okay, I'm going to assume we're good. Go ahead, Charlie. Sorry.
Okay, that's all right. So, get that back under control. Okay, so the question is, why is it that we don't know it? Well, part of it is that sometimes we just don't realize. I don't know if you can see this picture, but this guy driving it, at one point this must have started out as being a lot of fun, because he's just having a grand old time. He's got this huge smile on his face, but he has no idea that his world is about to come crashing down upon him. And I think that's where most folks in IT are. We've been subject to this constant state of change for so long that we've almost become numb to it. And so I think we become kind of dead to the fact that this is something different. Well, there's actually a reason for that. It's called the curse of knowledge. It was illustrated by a researcher at Stanford University in the late 80s. It actually predates that a little bit, but this researcher kind of brought it mainstream. And it's a very simple concept. It's this idea that once you know something, it becomes impossible to unknow it. It becomes impossible to imagine that anybody else doesn't also know it. And it's actually a very useful thing. It creates a mental model for us that allows us to operate on autopilot in areas that just don't require our cognizant attention. But it can also hinder us, because it can limit our ability to teach, because we assume that people know more than they do, or that they understand something in the same way that we do. And it can also limit our creativity, because we end up believing that that some set of knowledge is true until one day it isn't. And frankly, what we're talking about now, actually this curse of knowledge has been playing out for a while. Everything we're going to talk about starts really with the advent of the internet in the late 80s and early 90s. And there were a lot of us that frankly missed it. I was fortunate to have a friend in the aerospace industry, a friend and client in the late 80s, and she was talking to me about this new thing called the internet. Now here I was a PC guy, a tech guy, and I had glimpsed the future. She told me about it, and it just flew right by me. Had no idea that I had come in contact very briefly with this thing that was going to change everything. But I wasn't alone. This is a little clip from 1994 from the Today Show. And this is a full 5 years after my first interaction.
I wasn't prepared to translate this. This was to have a little T. That's a mark with the A and then the ring around it. See, that's what I said. Case that she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
never heard it. I've never heard it said. I don't think so anymore. I've never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I'm not going to let this go much longer. I know we have a lot that we've covered here. But the point of this is when the internet first came on the scene, and this actually, you can go look this up, it's hilarious. It goes on for like 10 minutes, and they're just kind of completely baffled by this concept. And of course, we laugh at it now. But when this first came out on the scene, none of us had any frame of reference for what the internet was, and most importantly, what it represented to the future of business, to technology, to all of it. And the big argument that I'm making with this is that IT organizations are in the exact same spot right now, is that we know that this is how things operate until we reach this point in which that is simply no longer true, and we just don't know it. And the reason I believe this has happened is that over the last 10 years, we've been subject to 3 market forces that I believe have really fundamentally changed the world of IT. And I don't mean like, yeah, it's going to be a little bit different. I mean completely changing the fundamental underpinnings of how the IT organization operates, how it behaves, how it thinks, the types of people it hires, and certainly the types of skills that are needed within it. And that's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to kind of quickly go through what those 3 market forces are, because it's easy to gloss over this. It's easy to think that this is just another run-of-the-mill change. And this is particularly true if you're talking to IT organizations, because it's the IT organization that needs to understand that they don't have an option. It's change or get left behind. So this story starts really back at about the turn of the new century here with the advent of Google in about the year 2000, about 10 years ago. And you could argue it maybe started a little bit before that. But in my opinion, what really changes is that Google suddenly democratized information. Now suddenly everybody could type on this simple little search bar and get access to an entire world of information that they just didn't have access to before. Now, the reason that was really important is because it began this shift of perception. So we broadly consider all of this that I'm going to talk about now the consumerization of IT. But what it's really about is about the changing perceptions that our customers have in terms of how they interact with the technology. So corporate executives, really everybody, started using Google, and now suddenly they had access to all this information at the tip of their fingers. And in fact, literally anywhere as mobility started to come into play. And then they would go back to their office and say, well, I have access to all this information with this simple search bar. And then I come into the office and it is so difficult. It is so hard. Why can't I get that same level of interaction? And then Facebook kind of came onto the scene, and that took a little bit longer to hit mainstream, but as it did, you know, we tend to refer to it as social media and social technologies, but really it's about collaboration, right? I mean, that's what Facebook is. It's a collaboration tool that allows people to interact and share and exchange ideas. And the same thing evolved. My last high school reunion was planned on Facebook. And so these same corporate executives, really, again, business folks at all levels, are using these kinds of technologies, and they're going, why can't I get this level of interaction and collaboration in my own office? And then finally, I think Apple, first with the introduction of the iPhone and then with the iPad, really changed the fundamental underpinning perception that most of us have with how we should interact with our technology. And even if you're not an Apple fan, the interface, the design elements that they've brought to technology have permeated really all aspects, certainly of mobile platforms. But look at Windows 8 and the design aesthetics that are coming. I mean, I think this entire approach of how we interact with technology and how we expect that customer experience, that user experience to look and feel like has been forever changed by what we now call the consumerization of IT. And so as that fundamental shift occurred, the perceptions of how our customers expect to interact with us as IT professionals has changed. And if you deal kind of on the other side of the house, then what you're dealing with is the frustration that the business customer is having with getting with their IT organization. So this fundamental perception has changed, and it's caused this initial rift in the relationship. While all that was going on, something else happened, and that is the criticality of IT has changed. When I started in IT, I really grew up in kind of the healthcare industry. And at one point in my career, I took over technical operations for a healthcare system, and I went to go visit our hospital. And I walked into the admitting department where patients would get admitted into the hospital, and there sitting next to the terminals was a stack of downtime forms. A lot of people in IT don't even know what a downtime form is anymore. They're still used in healthcare, but it's very simply a piece of paper that is used to write down manually patient information so that you can admit that patient if the system is not available. So I knew what they were, but I asked her, why are they sitting out? And her answer was simple and not very pleasant for me. It was, she said, well, the systems fail 4 or 5 times a day. Why would I bother putting them away? So as the person whose problem this now was, that was disconcerting. But it illustrates a very important point. Back then, and this wasn't that long ago, systems really, they were important, but they were not mission critical in most ways. This wasn't a matter of life and death for her. I mean, at the end of the day, she wasn't happy, but she also wasn't that upset. It wasn't that huge of a deal. Now fast forward, through the rise of the dot-com era and through the democratization of IT in general and technology, we now have technology literally infused into every single part of every single business process, everywhere, in virtually every size organization. I was speaking on an international conference just Tuesday. It was a global international 24-hour thing. And the moderator who I was speaking with said that she has a friend who has a dairy farm. And they own several hundred head of cattle, or I guess that's what they call them, that they milk these cows. And every single one of them has an RFID tag on them. And they're tracked as they move throughout the dairy farm so they know where they are and how often they've been milked. And all this data is being fed into the system. So technology has become infused into every single part of every single core business process. And at the same time, every single element of the customer transaction and the customer experience is now fueled by that same technology. So whereas in the past when systems failed, it may be inconvenient, but it wasn't life-threatening either truly or at an organizational level. Now, when systems fail, we are measuring it typically in minutes. People go home. In the case of healthcare, we can have an actual catastrophic event in terms of patient safety being at risk. In financial systems, those losses are often measured in millions of dollars per minute or even seconds. So I think that as we go through this, what really came down to is that our customers, again speaking from an IT perspective, are in a position here where all this is going on and the systems have become much, much more complex. And so they're relying for their very livelihood on systems that they do not understand, that are being run by people they fundamentally do not trust. And so we kind of had the first 2 pieces of what I consider the perfect storm that has led to this develop. The first, we had the consumerization, changing perspectives and perceptions of how technology should work and what that customer experience should feel like. And then we had the criticality rise up to the point that people were just really afraid and just looking for an answer. And then the third element of the perfect storm came along, and that is competition. So up until a few years ago, every company that's on this slide, and frankly hundreds more just like them and more being added every day, each of these companies are now providing services that up until a few years ago could only be provided by an internal IT organization. And so suddenly our customers have what they've always wanted, choice. So speaking again as an IT person, we have to wake up to this and say, you know what, this is a real issue. Because up until now, we were the only game in town. They may not have been happy, they may have been confused and concerned, they may have had different expectations, but they had nowhere else to go. Now with choice entering the picture, they can go someplace else, and they are in droves. And the real issue is that it's really not good either for us or for them in most cases. And I'm not saying these aren't good companies or that we shouldn't be utilizing these types of approaches. We absolutely should. But it needs to be done in a way that's controlled. But so what we have to understand is that as these come together, these 3 elements of the perfect storm, it represents a fundamental shift in the mode and the way that IT does business. And that really represents that IT, that we need to give up the ghost. IT will no longer be the sole source provider of technology to the enterprise. That is just the way it's going to be because there's just too many other things going on and it just doesn't make sense. And I'm going to explain exactly why that is right now. One of the other parts that happens as we start looking at this is that as we look at the history, and it was fascinating for me as I wrote this book and ended up doing all this research that I didn't really intend to do, I came to this kind of realization. And that realization was that we as IT organizations, we are fundamentally, or we have historically fundamentally, been manufacturers. We may have bought computers from IBM or DEC or whomever, and we certainly bought software and operating systems. But I'm old enough to remember soldering wires back in the basement when we were putting things together, and certainly writing tons of code. We manufacture technology for our enterprise. And as a result of that, we are structured that way. That's exactly how we were built. However, as we look at this, and as all this has gone on, the perception that our customers have of us has changed. And so they are no longer looking at us in this way. I don't know if they ever really did, but at least this kind of paradigm worked. They now, though, are being conditioned through all their experiences with Apple and with Android and with all the different things out there with the app stores, that they are really coming to us and expecting an experience like an Apple store. And instead, we're giving them a manufacturing plant. And so we can see why the customer experience is not really positive. And so what we have to recognize in IT, and what you as consultants have to help IT organizations recognize, is that we fundamentally have made this transition from being a manufacturer to being a retailer. And if we think about that for a minute, it brings with it a couple of other things. The first is that it brings with it a new set of skills and a set of disciplines that we just don't have in most IT organizations today, because it means we have to change the way we operate. It means that we need to bring in things like supply chain management, merchandising, customer experience management, things that any retailer is very used to and very accustomed to, and that most IT organizations have absolutely no idea about. It also means one other thing. It means that this idea of giving up this idea of being the sole source provider of IT really comes home. Think about retailers. There is not a single retailer, even though Walmart may come close, that can provide every single thing that you would ever need to purchase on a retail basis. Every retailer, by necessity, identifies a target market, identifies a value promise that it's going to make to that target market, and delivers just within that defined space. Maybe a high-end fashion store, maybe a toy store, maybe a children's boutique, maybe a grocery store. But whatever you are not everything to all people. This is the transition that the IT organization of the future is going to have to go through, to recognize where value is created within the organization and how IT can most strategically support that value, and then exit all the other lines of business that they are presently in that don't support it. Because there's a whole bunch of stuff that IT organizations do today that simply don't support this value proposition. So that's the transition that's going to happen, and as we go through that, then they're going to become what I call either a strategic sourcer or a strategic innovator. And a strategic sourcer basically means you're running like a Walmart. You're focused on efficiencies and cost control, and it's all about supply chain, but it's not about a high value, high touch. Versus the strategic innovator is much more like a Nordstrom's. Costs are always in play, but it's much more about driving that strategic innovation, that high touch, high customer experience feel. And it's not about right or wrong or even really choosing, it's about how the organization values their IT investment. And so IT organizations are going to have to go through this process. And as they do, you can start imagining that everything starts changing. Literally how we start organizing ourselves as an IT organization, how we define our services, how we deliver those services, how we interact with our customers. If we start putting on this view of being IT retailers, that all starts to become clear. And as we make that transition and decide whether we are going to end up on the strategic innovator, strategic sourcer side, then we start to become what I call a quantum IT organization. Now, quantum IT organizations really mean two things. The first is that the kind of common use of the term quantum is this idea of explosive. We talk about quantum chains, this major, massive amount. But from a physics standpoint, quantum is the smallest form of something that can maintain its characteristics, or the most optimal portion of something, or the optimal form of itself. And so, in my view, the quantum IT organization is one that is the most optimal form of itself, and that by doing that creates this explosive application of technology to solve real business problems and to create real business value. So how do we become this type of quantum IT organization? Well, I believe that every organization is going to have to embody 5 organizational traits, and every IT professional to support that is going to have to develop 5 professional skills. I'm going to go through these relatively quickly, but we can circle back to them during discussion and with some of the question and answers and afterward. The 5 traits are this. That every IT organization must first and foremost become a learning organization. And by the way, as these all pop up on the screen, the one thing you'll notice is that none of these traits are technical. These aren't about technology. These are really probably best described as business traits. And being a learning organization or becoming a learning organization is the foundation for all of it. It's really about, it doesn't mean being really good at education. It's based upon a book called The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge. And in it, it talks about building these learning organizations that are highly adaptable and are comfortable living in this constant state of change. A quick example about this that I love to point out is the Ritz-Carlton. It's a high-end hotel chain, if you don't know who they are. And they're highly regarded for their very high levels of customer service. One aspect of that is that they empower every single person in the organization to spend up to $5,000, I think that's the number, to make a customer happy, to solve a customer's problem. And that's great, but the part you don't often hear is that that same person that does that is then required to go into the back office and get onto this computer system that they've written or this computer application and log what they did, log what the situation was and what they did to solve it. And that gets fed into this very complex, very rigorous system that helps the organization continually learn from the challenges it's encountered and the actions it took to correct them so that it doesn't repeat those mistakes. And that has the double benefit of both reducing its ongoing costs, but also continually protecting and improving that customer experience. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about here, that IT organizations have to become very adept and very comfortable with living in a constant state of change. Now, once we have that as a foundation, they're going to have to become highly disciplined organizations. And in order to do that, that means putting in all the process discipline, the process rigor that comes with this. Things like ITIL, COBIT, there's a whole bunch of frameworks out there, Six Sigma, any form of process improvement is what we're talking about here. But the important thing that IT organizations are going to have to learn is to not get sucked into the bureaucracy of it, and instead to focus on doing just enough. And the real value here is that we're building a foundation of trust. And so that's what the idea of building a disciplined organization is all about. And that will then lead us to this idea of being a transparent organization. Now, transparency is not a term that is often used, even in business to some degree. We sometimes talk about corporate transparency, but I think what we're really saying here is this is about choice. When we go to our customers as IT people and we simply throw up all over them and saying, you know, here's all the junk that's going on, all this technical mumbo jumbo, so now can I have what I want? We're not serving our customer. We're not giving them what they really need, which is options. When I moved to California, one of the first things I did is I found a mechanic, or when I moved to my current home in California, because of course we all live by our cars here, and I found Marcus, my mechanic. And I love Marcus, and I put him in the book because I think he typifies what this is supposed to be. When I go to Marcus and I bring my car to him, I know that I'm going to get 3 things. The first is I'm going to get an objective assessment of the situation. He's just going to tell me what's going on. Second, he's going to give me my choices. He's going to tell me that I can maybe do something or do nothing, or maybe I've got several options of what I can do. And with each of those, he's going to give me the pros and cons. And he's not going to give it to me in the technical mumbo-jumbo of the car. He's not going to open up the hood and point to everything, which he knows I'm not going to understand anyway. He's simply going to give me those choices in terms of what it means to me, both safety and finance and whatever else that may be relevant. And then third, he's going to wait for me to make the right decision for me. This is the kind of approach and the trait that we need to develop in IT organizations, because when we try to simply drive through and act as if there is no business choice to be made, then what we really do is we engender a lack of trust, because our customers simply do not understand what we're talking about with all those technical mumbo-jumbo. And we can't ever get to this 4th trait, which I think is where it really starts coming home. And this 4th trait is intimacy. Now, intimacy actually refers to this idea of customer intimacy that has been developing in marketing research for the last 10 years or so. And it really just means that we as IT professionals are going to have to start living our lives in the world and in the lives of our customers. Bill Ray, who's the CIO, or was the CIO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island, he now got promoted to the COO, he explained this to me. He said when he talks to his team, he says, we can't go 50% of the way and expect our customers to meet us halfway. We need to go 80% of the way and let them come that last 20%. We need to go live our lives in their world so that we can understand what they're doing and the challenges that they are facing. And he called that the intimacy line. And so I think as we start crossing those divides, we can become this dynamic organization, the fifth trait, which is kind of a super trait. It brings all of these together and creates a much more powerful whole. And we become an organization that is constantly adapting and adept at change, is disciplined and rigorous so that we can meet our obligations, do what we say we're going to do on a consistent and reliable basis. We give our customers choice that is business-driven and aligned to their needs. And we do it from a context of understanding really who they are, what their goals and challenges are, and how technology can be leveraged to help solve them. And as we do this, then suddenly the entire relationship between us and our customers changes. And as you start putting your hat on as a consultant and look at this, what you should be able to see pretty quickly is that almost none of this exists in most IT organizations today. And so there is a ton of work that needs to be done to help them embody these traits. But there's also going to be work to be done helping their customers, the business, if you will, be prepared to accept this change, because we've spent 45 years training them how to interact with us, and they're going to have to unlearn some of that. So it's almost like a dysfunctional marriage that we need to help get fixed. So I'm being told to take a pause here and ask for questions, so I will do that now before we move on to the 5 skills.
So just to let you know, I've unmuted everyone's phone or computer, however you're in. So if you have a question, please feel free to bring it up.
Charles, the one question Ella has is in reference to the adoption of the quantum disciplines here that we just discussed for the organizational traits. How responsive have the organizations been to, I mean, I agree with the discipline and some of the concepts, but how receptive have they been to the quantum organization? I mean, I've seen this in and out of organizations, but I just wonder what feedback you've gotten in turnaround time and adopting this.
Test.
So if you're talking about IT executives, I think it's
let me turn my volume down a little bit. That's the feedback here. Okay, go ahead.
So I think from an IT executive standpoint, I'm going to back up a little bit just in case it's me. There's really kind of 2 categories, I think, that we see. I had the opportunity to interview about 6 CIOs for this, and there are a lot of CIOs out there that absolutely touch it. A lot of pieces of this. When I talk to IT executives, most of the time, they absolutely understand this. I mean, you'll see there's a whole bunch of folks in there. Most of these guys are either IT executives or former IT executives. There is probably not a one
that doesn't really understand that it's all changing, and that they may not exactly be able to quantify how or why. They know that it's not business as usual.
So I think there's certainly an uptick in that. I think the biggest hiccup is, and I actually...
I think the biggest hiccup is, and I actually...
The biggest challenge
later, but
really
the
strongly
biggest
through the last 5
years.
years.
Really pretty strongly over the last through the last financial and so they're sitting here with their hair on fire, being planned 6 different directions, being asked,
in effect,
they know all of this, but we're, in effect, we're telling them, they're playing. We're telling them,
no landing strip for you, but by the way, you need
to because there's no landing strip for you, but by the way, you need to.
And so they're going to need a ton of help to go down this road. So I think that generally speaking, there is a lot of receptiveness. They just need help figuring out how to connect the dots between understanding the vision and how they're going to get there on a practical day-to-day basis. Which is why the consulting organization is a great opportunity, because that's almost certainly going to have to be resources that are coming from the outside, either to augment what they're coming from the outside, either to augment what the person is doing, create some of their people for strategic work, or to just help them do all strategic work.
Another question I would ask is, some of the for example, in IT or Six Sigma, sometimes at the executive management level, feedback is good as well. We'll just call it lean IT to check more scope and what plans to get things done. Some of the feedback that you're getting from your studies.
Yeah, well, I think if there's one overarching message to this, there's probably a few overarching messages, but one of them is that, I think when people go and take any one of them and attempt to develop an employee in isolation, it doesn't have the right impact. So I talked about how, if there's any one aspect of this that's most important, it's that. And that's because one of the things that it brings into the fold is this concept of systems thinking. And systems thinking says, I cannot work on just one part of a system without understanding the impact on the rest of the system and expect to have a good outcome. And so when people go and they look at, lean IT or, whatever approach, and they're only focusing on one part of the equation, then we're going to get unintended consequences. And challenges is we as humans, we learn through this very simple process. If I have a glass of water here, if I hit it with my hand and it knocks over, I learn pretty quick that action led to that reaction, which is something that I don't want. But here's how it works in most IT organizations, and in fact in most enterprise organizations for any kind of major business process or business change. I hit that glass with my hand, and 4 days later it falls over and spills all the water. I can't connect the dots on that naturally. And so that's what happens when we see this. So the big message to IT organizations is you need to go down this road and lead this transformation holistically, adopting all of these traits and building it in. Likewise, intimacy, right? If I go in and try to build an intimate relationship with my customer, but I don't have the discipline and the rigor behind it as a foundation of trust, I'm going to get laughed out of that room. And so I have to be building all of these all in concert for this to work, because otherwise that's exactly what you just described is exactly what happens. That either because we're using it as a tool to simply do a political maneuver, or we're doing it genuinely, but we're getting the wrong outcome because we're only looking at one part of the puzzle.
It's a behavioral, cultural, and organizational change, and it happens over time.
And so, like you mentioned in healthcare, background, I've seen it in corporate offices, at enterprise level. And for example, on the business side, they may say, well, why can't we just suppress the field, to the business side, it might look like a yes or no question or answer, but on the IT side, there could be thousands of programs behind the scenes, complexities, and multiple, nine different major components of the organization that try to impact what looks like one yes or no field on a screen. And so that's an example of what you're talking about. So that's why I said, as far as resources and so on, sometimes I'll have those resources spread so thin across different fronts when it comes to implementing that the organization, many times organizations aren't patient enough to adopt these traits to demonstrate through metrics on the back end the result. But I'm in agreement with I just wanted to get your feedback as to what you were hearing from you. And it aligns with my experience.
Let me add one thing, because I think it's a really important point. I skipped it when I was talking about intimacy, but there's two parts to this. When we talk about what you just described, to me, is a fundamental failure of intimacy or to some degree of the necessary imagination. And what I mean by that is this, is that the fundamental way that most IT organizations build and manage their relationship right now is through a combination of requirements on the front end and SLAs on the back end. And it is a fundamentally flawed relationship because it puts the onus on our customer for them to know what they want up front. And most of the time, they simply do not. So when Steve Jobs was interviewed after the iPad had come out, he was being interviewed by this analyst, and it was clear that it had already become a runaway success. And I don't know if you remember, because of course we all have selective memory, that now the iPad seems like, well, duh, of course it's an obvious question, but when it first came out, there was a lot of like, do we really need a new platform? And so he was asked, what kind of market research went into designing the iPad? And his answer was none. It's not the customer's job to know what they want. So what you just described is fundamentally a failure of intimacy, because somewhere along the line, some developer or some business analyst asked a customer what they want. They told them what they thought they needed. That turned into a field. That turned into this big complex system that ran underneath it. So when later that customer needed to change that, there was this mismatch. And it fundamentally comes down to that the IT organization, the people that were designing this technology, did not really understand the business, their needs, and where it was going, and therefore could not envision a future that would lead to a change that would completely disrupt everything they'd architected on the back end of it. So with that, I know we're going to run out of time, otherwise we need to move on to the 5 skills, and we'll kind of keep going. All right, so here is the fallacy. As Dave mentioned, the name of our organization is the IT Transformation Institute. And as you might imagine, with a name like that, we spend a ton of time talking with organizations, with industry leaders and IT leaders about organizational transformation. But here's our dirty little secret. It's a myth. There's no such thing as organizational transformation. There's only personal transformation multiplied across an organization that then manifests itself as organizational transformation. So when we talk about organizational transformation and cultural change and all these things, what we're really talking about is changing individual personal behavior. And so as part of that, we have to understand that every IT professional is going to have to learn a new set of skills if they're going to be relevant in this new age. If we as IT organizations, if we're going to help IT organizations embody these 5 traits. So like the 5 traits, these 5 skills are not particularly technical skills. In fact, they're not technical skills at all. These, again, are pretty much business skills. And again, I'll go through these kind of quickly, but I think we'll then tie this up with some of the opportunities that I see for you as consulting organizations or as consulting professionals. The first is we need to learn financial management. IT people are horrible at this. We don't like numbers unless they're bits and bytes. Speeds and feeds are great, but we don't want to talk dollars and cents. And it just doesn't make any sense, because if the entire rest of the organization talks in terms of dollars, every single business decision is made in terms of finance, and yet the IT organization routinely brings things to the business with the justification being because we have to, or as a security risk, or it's whatever. And we're going to have to get IT professionals to learn to speak in terms of business finance. And the reason we need to do this is kind of like our customers in a different country than us, and we speak a different language than they do. And we've never bothered to learn their language. And so then we wonder why we do not provide a good customer experience, why they aren't happy with the support we provide, why we can't develop a product that they really enjoy. Well, it's because we can't understand them. And so we need to get these financial skills built. The second one is critical thinking skills. Now the good news is this comes naturally to most IT folks. The bad news is that most of them have forgotten it. That we have become, as we continue to cut to the bone, we've continued to rely on best practices, routine efforts, and this whole idea, we're rigor gone wild, if you will, where we've tried to standardize things to the point that IT folks have become nothing but human robots in a lot of cases. A good friend of mine is an analyst with Forrester, and he calls it, pseudo geeks, I think, or fake geeks, or he's got some term like that. Because this idea that we have folks that think they're being technical, but really they're just doing the same thing over and over and over again without thinking. And so we're going to have to recognize that the only great driver of innovation in most organizations today is in fact technology. And so we cannot simply whitewash this and think that all technology is created equal and not care about it. We need to think critically about how value gets created and how we can leverage it to create that kind of strategic value for the organization. The third trait is, or the third skill rather, is marketing and communication. IT people like to think that they don't need to have these skills, that our work should speak for itself. It just doesn't. And while maybe we could have gotten away with this, and I don't really think so, but at least there maybe wasn't a huge impact in the past, today with all that competition out there, these people are marketing their services. They are talking in terms that our customers understand, in the language of business. And if we don't tell our story, we are going to get lost and lose our relevance. And so I think that the real big loss for me, or the thing that is really challenging, is that I go into a lot of IT organizations and they actually are doing a really good job in a lot of ways. It's just that nobody knows it. So we need to teach these skills so that they are able to market themselves and communicate effectively in business terms. The fourth skill, and I think we're kind of moving up to complexity and difficulty, but this is the one where we start really hitting it home. And this is this building the skills of innovation and collaboration. Now, the fact of the matter is that really from this point on, almost no technology innovation is going to occur inside the walls of the enterprise. It really hasn't for quite a while already, but it's certainly not going to happen in the future. That said, Procter & Gamble is viewed as one of the most innovative companies in the world, and yet what do they make? They make commodity items, laundry detergent, soap, and food products. They are viewed as innovative not because of their technology or product innovation, but because of their business process innovation. And this is the big missing link, the holy grail, I believe, for IT organizations and IT professionals, is that we can learn to create business process innovation, leveraging technology to do it, where we're taking technology that we either already have or can easily acquire and recombining it in ways that create unique competitive value for our organizations. That's something that the business, that our customers desperately want and need, and we need to develop those skills. The reason collaboration becomes a part of that is because there is not a single innovation that's going to be driven from within a singular silo of the IT organization. It's going to be driven by building coalitions across the functional silos of the IT organization, bringing these people together to solve a specific problem that can kind of create what I like to call or think of as exponential value. And so these kind of skills are going to be really, really important. And then lastly, I think that what that really is going to boil down to is this idea of leadership. So I think that as we go through this, when we talk about how do you drive innovation, how do you do a lot of this stuff, it really comes down to this huge gap that we have in IT organizations, and that is this gap of leadership. And so IT professionals are going to have to learn that this hierarchical function of the past just isn't going to really survive. When we're living in this fast world, our customers are living in this fast world. The market is changing incredibly quickly, very dynamically, and they need an IT partner that can move and react with them. And we just can't operate in a hierarchical fashion and expect to be that kind of organization. And that means that decision making is going to get pushed incredibly deep into the organization, and that's going to take leadership skills at every single level. And so I think that it may be one of the hardest to develop because it's hard to quantify what that means, but leadership skills are going to be one of the key missing ingredients. So at this point, I want to go and talk a little bit about, well, so I'm being told to pause again for questions here before we talk about the opportunities that I see, so I guess we'll stop it.
Okay, your lines have been unmuted. If there's any questions, please go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying the lines are unmuted, but you beat me to it. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to agree with the innovation and the collaboration that before when you mentioned about the transparency and intimacy, a lot of times that doesn't exist across the business strategy because many times the budgets are separate and sometimes one side drives more so than the other depending on the organization. So the education there are some groups they have specifically designed for innovation and others. There's stakeholder initiatives and collaboration that occurs, but some of the experience I've seen there is that you'll have only X number of subject matter experts in the room to do the problem solving and the brainstorming. And then most people can't be in every meeting across organizations for every initiative. And so that goes back to your resource allocation and then the requirements definition on the front end on the business side doesn't get addressed. And typically across the enterprise, no matter what organization, then they want to squeeze that timeline and get into testing and it's too late. So these principles being integrated, I'm just wondering how you get them integrated into the executive decision while bridging the gap in the budgets and having the right people in the room and so forth. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, so I think it's there. So the financial and the budget aspect of it is a huge challenge. Ironically, I think the thing that could kill the IT organization, which is competition, could also be what saves it. So as IT organizations kind of start embodying all of this, one of the things that will happen is a natural move to a transactional revenue model, right? At the end of the day, we're competing with folks that are charging on a per user per month basis or whatever that transactional cloud software as a service type model looks like. Well, IT organizations are going to have to compete with that, which means the financial model is going to have to change from a traditional budget allocation type model to a transactional financial model. Now, with that, I think that actually is a huge benefit because it's now suddenly, again, if we, and I can't say this enough, the very first, most important step is a mental mind shift that says, I don't have to own every piece of technology to be relevant to my customers. So Joe Pleasant, who is the CIO of a company in North Carolina, one of the CIOs I interviewed, he did something that I think is very challenging and very courageous, frankly, but it's where it's going to go. Every single year, and he's an interesting situation because his customers are also his shareholders. So they're basically owned by a co-op of 300 hospitals. And so he has an executive council of the biggest of his customers that he gets together every year and makes a presentation. And they do a market analysis. They hear the services that we provide to our customers. And we looked at these, and you know what? We believe these services are best provided not by us anymore because they can be provided more efficiently, more cost-effectively, whatever it is, by some outside provider. So we are therefore going to exit that line of business and instead refocus our energies in these areas where we provide more strategic value to the organization, right? As we start jettisoning those non-strategic elements of our business, then I think we are able to kind of change the dynamic. And so the financial piece is first, right? So the financial piece has to change to enable this to happen. The other thing that starts happening, though, as we go down this road, as we create intimacy, we start thinking in terms of product cycles. Now, in fact, I was just working with a software startup, actually, and we came in and did a workshop for them about their product strategy based on all these same concepts. Well, as part of that, we were talking about how they need to be looking forward, and what I was suggesting to them is they need to split into, they need their innovation path, which is looking at 2-3 years in the future, and then their short one that's kind of working incrementally. And IT organizations, when we talk about intimacy, it's the same idea, right? Part of the reason you get the subject matter experts so slammed because we're working so tactically. We have to get to the point where we start focusing those folks on the high value areas and the high value parts of the focus. The reason that doesn't happen in most cases is that most IT organizations have absolutely no capability of understanding how value is created. And if they don't understand how value is created through the IT investments in the organization, they can't begin to assign resources in the way that's going to generate the most value or to support that value. Which, by the way, leads me to where I think we need to go with this. So I think as all of this turmoil kicks up, and I think it's exactly what it's going to be, there's going to be a lot of opportunity. As I mentioned before, most IT organizations are flying this twin-prop airplane. We're telling them that they need to transform themselves into a fighter jet, and by the way, they can't land the plane. The only way that's going to be even remotely possible is if folks like you come alongside them, understanding the situation, where they're going, the vision of what they need to become, and the tactical situation on the ground as it stands right now, and to help them lead through that process, because they're going to need a lot of help. I mean, to be quite frank about it, it's going to be very lonely for IT people over the next few years. IT executives, those that have not already exhibited a lot of this, are going to find themselves completely squeezed, and we're seeing this every day right now. That on the one hand, they've got a customer who is not happy, who is displeased, and frankly is most of the time, if not there, at the point of giving up. They're looking at these outside organizations, these competitors, and starting to bring this stuff in on the fly and on the side and whatever else. So they've got all the stress of that. And then they've got their teams who are fundamentally not getting it because they live in their technical world. And they are sitting here just going, you know, why does it have to change? I'm tired of change. You know, can't the customer just figure it out? So IT management teams and executives are going to be desperate for people that understand what they are going through. And so this is, I think, the opportunity to help them. So 4 major gaps, I think, that as consultants, you guys can help fill and help IT organizations and the business come together to change the way they look at each other, fix this relationship. The first one is supply chain. So as we talk about this, IT is right now used to working in within the walls of their domain. As we move forward, what should have become clear here is that as we stop being the sole source provider, what we're really talking about is creating an ecosystem of suppliers. That there's this entire network of folks that are providing elements of technology that get either delivered independently or recombined in different ways to deliver value to the customer. And so the way that IT organizations look at how that technology is created and delivered is changing. And so organizations are going to need a lot of help understanding supply chains to begin with. And then along with that says that I have to recognize that when I look at that supply chain, value is not created equally across it. That certain elements of it are created, or value is created more at certain points than at others. And that value, by the way, is only in the context of business value that we generate. And so we have to understand it. Again, IT people, I think, generally speaking, because of the lack of financial understanding, the lack of intimacy with understanding exactly the business that they're in and how value is created in those business processes, this is a huge gap that needs to be filled. The third gap that I think you guys can help fill is this idea of understanding the customer experience and enhancing it. Most IT organizations have absolutely no concept, really, even of the fact that they're providing a customer experience, despite the fact that they're doing it every day. And so they're going to need a lot of help being able to quantify that customer experience and then reorganizing themselves. And I do think it's more than just process, this is some reorganization, so that they are delivering the type of customer experience that they need to be. And of course, they need to understand it in the context of their customers to begin with. And then the last one is, as I just was talking about, this idea of leadership. We have got to help IT organizations build leadership skills across the entire enterprise. And a lot of this may be the biggest challenge for you as consultants. When I was talking with, I was speaking at a management team meeting for a management consulting firm a few weeks ago, and they were going, as I put up the slide with the 5 skills, they said, that's what we do. Those 5 skills, that's why IT organizations bring us in, because they can't do any of those things and we have those skills. And my challenge back to them, and my challenge therefore to you, is you need to help develop all of these skills in them. Because in the end, if IT organizations do not make this transition, then they're done. And that is a really bad outcome for IT organizations. It's also a really bad organization for enterprises of all sizes, and it's a very bad outcome for all of us. In the end, we've got to make this happen. My message to IT executives a lot of times is this, that this change, in my opinion, is a foregone conclusion. It's happening. The only choice is whether or not you lead this change or whether this change is thrust upon you. And when it's thrust upon you, the outcome isn't good. So I think there's a huge opportunity for you to help organizations build these skills, to build the leadership that they need. And in doing so, you create huge advocates through the whole thing. Okay, so with that, I'm going to open up to any last questions. This is my information. This is, of course, Victor's book, and we can continue this conversation afterwards via email or Twitter or whatever else. So, Don, do we have anything else?
Well, the only comment that I would make is that one of the things I've seen is what you shared, and I appreciate your time and effort, is that across the different lines of business, you'll see functional, even within IT, you'll see the functional, there's not cross-functional aspects of the different elements address, the leadership and the understanding and the collaboration. So you get elements of it, but you don't get the cross-functional collaboration and execution. That's what I've discovered in training. And that's in 12 different industries. I agree with these elements. It's getting that shared knowledge adopted culturally, behaviorally, and organizationally. Sometimes that can take, depending on the maturity model. Sometimes those things can be adopted right away. Sometimes it might take 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, this is so I think what we're seeing here, this is going to play out over the next 5 to 10 years. I think it is absolutely happened and happening right now, and you're right. And look, I mean, as much as I would love to say that every IT organization is going to get this and make these changes and do this, I actually don't think that's true. I think there's a large number of IT organizations that are going to not heed this warning and are going to wake up one day and will have been told, you know what, we've decided that you're not really necessary anymore. We've chosen these 17 providers of SaaS solutions, and they're going to run our business for us. I actually know a CIO at a bank up in Northern California that that's exactly what happened to them. And those outcomes, in my opinion, are bad for everybody. And so the challenge for us, and this is how I'm viewing it and how I'm viewing this partnership with JLA, is that I think we have a challenge in front of us. The challenge in front of us is to go help stop that from happening, to help people understand that this is not run-of-the-mill, that the time for waiting is gone, and that we need to take a holistic view, a strategic view of recreating the IT organization. And I literally mean throwing away huge chunks of how we organize ourselves, the type of people we hire, how we train them, completely. And I mean, and so people tend to, I take this thing of manufacturing to retail and they kind of gloss over it like it's just this idea. I mean it very seriously, that if you think about how a retail organization is run and how it's structured, it looks nothing like an IT organization today. We don't have development teams. I mean, we need to be thinking in terms of product managers who are organizing, merchandising managers who are packaging customers' experience. Those kinds of aspects require fundamental shifts in how we approach it. And I think as we, and by the way, as business consultants, I'm not sure which side of the line you're on, but as you know, for those that are working on the business side, as I said, we have 45 years of history that we have to overcome, and the fact that we haven't always performed to help them, the business customer, be ready for this change as well. So there's a lot at stake that we need to react to.
Yeah, and I'll just make this one last comment. When you mentioned about the transactional processing and, across the different units that have the value add, and you almost like I'm hearing myself in speeches from the past where you can quantify value add in ways that they don't even quantify, that wouldn't even show up in key performance indicators or performance measures or even in performance evaluations. And, across customer, investor, organization, and employee from a hybrid model perspective. And so I think it touches base with the same things that you're bringing here. So I know that we're getting close to being out of time, and I don't want to take all the time, but I appreciate you sharing that. And my experience aligns with a lot of your studies, so I appreciate the feedback, and it kind of brings back a lot of, as they say, those war stories, over the years. But I know that the direction that that IT is heading, that they're going to have to adopt these things to continue to, as they say, have process improvement and bridge those gaps. Because I've seen the same things, from startup companies to the federal government. So just want to make those comments and basically align with the information that you're sharing. So that's really all I have.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. John, anything else, or Sorry, well, I
appreciate that. John, anything else, or if not, back to you?
No, that's it. I'll turn it over to Dave to close this out.
Great. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. This was very insightful. I think the second time I've listened to this, Charlie, the interesting thing is I see more need for non-IT consultants in this area than perhaps IT consultants, because it's all about some fundamental shifts in thinking and managing, and very much that retail example is fantastic. I want to thank you for presenting to everybody today, and thanks, John, and we'll talk to everybody next time.
Thanks, Dave.
And that concludes our webcast, so thank you for joining, everyone.